Have you ever noticed that there's no large sheep flocks in the eastern United States? If you live east of the Mississippi River in the USA, think about the largest sheep operation you know of in your state. And put in the comments below if you know of one. But from what I've seen, there's not a lot of really big sheep operations. And there's no real significant wool production in the eastern United States either that I know of. We do see that out west. There are some big ranches that have wool production. So why doesn't it happen here? So let's compare what happens in the eastern United States with what goes on out west. This is the Julian Land and Livestock Farm located near Kemmerer, Wyoming. This is a family-owned operation, and it manages over 10,000 Rambouillet sheep, making it one of the largest sheep ranches in the entire state of Wyoming. This is the Roberts Ranch, located near Cokeville, Wyoming. It runs about 7,000 ewes, along with 400 head of cattle. And so it's just another huge sheep operation. Why don't we have that here, like in Tennessee? And they are running wool sheep. They're not running hair sheep. They're making wool and they're making meat at the same time. So what's going on with this? So I found this sheep production map by state from a website called World Population Review. And you can look and you can see how, from the colors on the chart, how most of the sheep production is in the western part of the United States, with Texas, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, South Dakota, Idaho being large sheep-producing states that are very dry, while Washington State on the west coast is not a big sheep-producing state. But there's almost no large-scale production of sheep in the states that are east of the Mississippi River that have higher rates of rainfall. Then I looked at this chart for Tennessee on the number of sheep and lambs per farm in Tennessee by county from 2007, and I was shocked. I didn't realize that most of these farms are just very, very small. They only have like less than 40 sheep, even in the most populous counties. Just very, very small flocks. So then I found this chart from sheepusa.org that gave me the total number of sheep in each state, and also the total number of sheep operations per state. And it gave me the flock size of each state, which was really an eye-opener. All I had to do was divide the number of sheep by the number of operations in each state, and that gave me the total average flock size for each state. And so here's what I found. In Tennessee, the average number of sheep per farm is only 24 sheep. 24 head of sheep in each farm. There's 51,000 sheep. You divide that out by 2,083 farms, you end up with 24. And just to go along with what I'm trying to find out, I also included the average rainfall for each state. And there's a correlation there that I'm starting to see. North Carolina only has 21 sheep per farm, and then Kentucky has 27 sheep per farm. Still very, very low. For the northeastern Atlantic states, for the states of New England, which would be Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Vermont, there's an average of 20 sheep per farm. For Virginia, it was just 34 sheep per farm, and West Virginia, 33 sheep per farm. With the north central states of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, it's between 32 and 34 sheep per farm. And I also noticed that the average amount of rainfall is less than what we see like in Tennessee and some of the other states. So when you start dropping the rainfall, you see the number of sheep per farm starts to increase. So that's a correlation I see, is that the average amount of rainfall, as it decreases, the number of sheep per farm increases. Texas is unique because it's such a large state. West Texas is very dry, while East Texas is a lot like Louisiana. If you ever have driven from El Paso all the way down Highway 10 to Galveston, which I did one time, there's a lot of different environments in Texas. It can be wet or dry. So it's a combination of at least what should normally be like 2 or 3 states is what Texas is. And with this, you're still seeing an increase to 53 sheep per farm and a decrease of the average rainfall to 27 inches. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Wyoming has only 13 inches of rainfall and an average of 502 sheep per farm. These other states like Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, they're between 194 on down to about 130. So they're still up nearly 200 sheep per farm. They have a little bit more rainfall than Wyoming, but so much more than anything east of the Mississippi. Their rainfall is lower, and the number of sheep per farm. So apparently, commercial sheep farming works in these states, but it does not work east of the Mississippi River I believe because of the humidity. Then there's these mid-tier western states like Colorado that has 270 sheep per farm, only 15 inches of rainfall. Nevada with 213 sheep, and Utah with 157 sheep per farm with only 12 inches of rainfall. And that's telling you again that commercial sheep operations can exist here, but they do not exist in any great number east of the Mississippi like they do out west. And this last group of states, the West Coast states, is very, very interesting. Washington State has 26 sheep per farm, which means there's no real commercial sheep operations there, and 38 inches of rainfall. Oregon has 57 sheep per farm, so that means there's some commercial sheep operations, 28 inches of rainfall. And California has 161 sheep per farm, which is telling us there's a lot of commercial sheep operations there, and it's 22 inches of rainfall. So as the rainfall drops, the amount of rainfall they get, the more they increase their sheep output. I think it's all tied to the barber pole worm and these other parasites that sheep have such a hard time dealing with. You know, these worms, they depend upon moisture to complete their life cycle. If it's always dry, you won't have worms. But in places where it's hot and humid, like the southeast United States or just the eastern United States with higher humidity, you're going to have these worms, and there's going to be a problem with them. Also realize that these wool sheep breeds have little, if any, parasite resistance. So it explains why they don't raise sheep in the eastern United States, but also why they don't make wool here either. Even though there's plenty of good grass for sheep, it's because of the worm problem. That's it. So how does moisture and the barber pole worm limit the flock size of sheep in the eastern United States and limit sheep production as well? How does that work? To test a sheep for worms, you have to run them through a chute and look at their eyes or their gums. And if their eyes or their gums are white, that means they're anemic and that they have a high worm load. And you treat that sheep. But you shouldn't treat all the sheep. You just want to treat the ones that are sick. Otherwise, your worm medication won't keep working. So it takes a human to look at the color of each one of these animals in the entire herd. So if you've got a large herd, it's going to take a long time to look at each one of these animals. And according to data provided by the Small Ruminants Division of the North Carolina State University, about the timing of the FAMACHA test for sheep, they recommend, this is what they say on their website, is that animals should be monitored regularly, at least every 2 to 3 weeks during the Haemococcus transmission season, and possibly as often as weekly at the peak of the worm season. So the limiting factor is the amount of time that it takes to run these tests, because a human has to do that. And so I think that's really what's keeping these flocks so small. If it takes only 2 minutes to run a FAMACHA test and then drench a single sheep for worms, load them into the chute and all that, then when testing and treating 30 sheep in a small flock, it'll take about an hour every week during the peak of worm season. This may be an acceptable limit for the small hobby farmer in the eastern United States. But for testing 300 sheep, 2 minutes would require someone to work 10 hours a week. For handling 3,000 sheep, it would take 100 hours of labor every week to do the FAMACHA test and drench the sheep for worms, which is just impossible. For sheep breeds that need to be vaccinated, that's really just a once-a-year thing and not an ongoing expense, as well as shearing sheep. If you shear sheep, then you're going to get the wool out of it to pay for your cost, and it's going to be once a year that you do this. So you're really not tied to a schedule like you would be with this weekly FAMACHA testing and drenching. It's going to take time. It's going to take committed resources that are like a fixed cost. And if you don't do it, you're going to end up with dead sheep. But there's another reason that big commercial outfits are not moving to the eastern United States with all the extra grass we have to set up, and that's something called ant helmintic resistance. Dewormers are called ant helmintics, and as these nematodes or these barber pole worms develop resistance to it, that's called ant helmintic resistance. What that means is that the dewormers, the chemical dewormers that we have now, are starting to fail because these nematodes are no longer being affected by them. If you look at the article on Wikipedia, it tells you that there was a study in Europe that found that the resistance of nematodes, or these barber pole worms and others, to all the different dewormers has risen to at least 86% in one type of dewormer, 52% and 48% in the other two types of dewormer. So no large commercial sheep operation is ever going to move from out west to Tennessee to take advantage of all the great forage we have here, because they know that tomorrow the dewormers could quit working and they would lose their entire operation. It's one thing to lose like 30 sheep in your backyard, but to lose like 10,000, that's an entirely different ball game. So what's the answer to this problem? The answer is, for large-scale commercial production in the eastern United States, is to raise only chemical-free and parasite-resistant sheep that are suitable and that do not require chemical dewormers to live. This is what farmers did prior to the development of chemical dewormers in the 1950s, or else they did not raise sheep here at all in areas with high humidity. St. Croix sheep are the leading candidate to become this type of sheep for the Southeast. The other would be Barbados blackbelly sheep, which are also parasite resistant. The Katahdin makes a bigger carcass, but it has about half the resistance to parasite that the St. Croix does. Its resistance comes because it is half St. Croix mixed with another type of sheep. And it's got a possibility. The Katahdin does have a possibility, but from what I've seen, you usually have to do something with them. You have to check them every so often, not as much as other sheep. But with the St. Croix, there's absolutely nothing you have to do. And so that means you can scale up to as big an operation as you want to with very little labor inputs. And so that's why I believe St. Croix sheep are going to be the answer for raising sheep in the Southeast. Thanks for watching. That would be marvelous. Triplets, looks like. big she is. God.